Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's everyone doing? Welcome to our Week 8 preview show. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marsilio Langella. Mars, how's it going, man?
Going well, dude. I mean, we're finally in the playoffs, and it's probably considered to be the most exciting part of the season because now it's winner, winner continues, loser goes home, and it's always the best time of the year.
Yeah, and I want to welcome our audience. Welcome, everyone. Now there was just a little slight delay there, but welcome to our Week 8 preview show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in. We're going to be covering the final regular season of the C and D League, and then dive into the playoffs. And Mars brought it up. It is win or go home. Best part of the year for football for a lot of these teams. And obviously it is Halloween, so Mars, the Grim Reaper is going to be coming this weekend for a couple teams that lose, and the other teams that survive continue to go forward. So happy Halloween to everyone. Also, special shout out to our Patreon members. We appreciate you guys for all your support. Your donations mean a lot to us, and so we're very appreciative of them. With that said, I know people are going to be filtering in, and don't worry, I've said this multiple times. If you miss anything, don't worry, this is on our website or YouTube. If you go to the live part of their, you see different videos and stuff, you click on the live tab, and you can see our previous live streams, which will go through all the games. So we'll let people filter in. Normally what we'd like to do is put up a poll on who you guys think is going to win in game picks, but we're going to do it since it's playoff season. We'll do things a little bit different, and what we'll have is when we get to the playoff games, we'll put these flash polls in the chat, and you guys pick who do you think is going to win. Are you going to say something?
No, my biggest thing was more just that when we start hitting these playoff games, it's going to be a lot of saltiness is going to be coming out.
Oh yeah,
so
there is. There's going to be a lot, but let's dive into it, and like we do each week. If you guys have any questions, also throw that in the chat as well, and hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so yet already. I think we're about to hit 1,100 subscribers, which is always great. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. So let's talk about last week, Mars. And again, not going into the games, but another tight one between me and you. And I ended up going 22-6. Mars, you went 20-7. So one loss difference between us. So that does put me up 4-1 on you, Mars, with 2 pushes. So I'm starting to pull away here, but the bad news for both of us, I'm sitting at 75% of my game picks right. You're sitting at 72. We have to get to 80 somehow, dude. So we're running out of time. We're gonna have to go Super Saiyan, or we're gonna be in trouble here. But yeah. So another good week. Mars, it's a loss for you, man. What's going on? 2 straight.
I mean, I'm always down at least 2 games, and that's about it. And it's always the teams I'm pulling for, or I'm always on
You're
the
letting your
fence
bias
on, and
get to
I'll
you?
take that. I'll take my gambles there, and they just disappoint me, and they can't pull off those wins.
All right, let's dive into the game picks, right? And definitely want to give a quick shout out. There's a lot of school accounts or fan accounts that make a quick shout out before I do the games. That make kind of these visuals and stuff like that. Some of it's memeing, some of it's really nice visuals. And I tell you what, I think some of them do a pretty damn good job. I didn't have a chance to pull a bunch of them, but there was somebody I did want to give a shout out to because I was thinking about using it, but I didn't want, I didn't get permission, so I'm not going to put it up on the screen. But G Harris 2K, I think he's over at RCK. He makes some nice visuals for AA football. And so if you guys get and create those and want them to be shown, see some of the art that you guys do, don't be, just reach out, right? We're a pretty open book here. So just wanted to kind of give that message. I know we're reaching towards the end of the season, but I've gotten a chance to see some of the work that people have done, and they do a pretty good job. So with that, let's dive into the games, Mars. We're going to start at C and D because it's the last regular season week for them, and then dive into the playoff games. And the first one I want to talk about is the really big matchup here, which is Valhalla, who's 6-0, at Putt Valley, who's 5-2. And the winner takes the C League and the number 1 seed in the playoffs. So the winner is the number 1 seed. The loser is the number 2 seed. And last week, Valhalla won 42-14 at Woodlands. Putt Valley won 62-35 versus Dobbs Ferry last week. So, when I look at these two teams, Mars, both teams are playing good football at the right time, right? Right at playoff last week of the regular season. I mean, Valhalla has been kind of the most complete team, in my opinion. The closest game they've had this year was a 21-point win in week 2 versus Haldane. They have really dominated teams this season. And they got the number 1 offense in points scored. They have 5 30-plus point games, and it's really on the back of a trio of backs in Foyset, Ratty, and Bergie. They're like the earth, wind, and fire of this team. And it's their mixture of strength, speed, elusiveness that puts a lot of pressure on a defense. They scored 5 touchdowns combined last week. And, Mullard is another guy who has stepped up. He had over 100 yards and a touchdown. But this offensive line really continues to dominate. They also have the number 1 defense. They've not given up more than 14 points in a game. And when I look at Putt Valley, they come in with the number 2 offense out of C&D. They have scored 146 points, Mars, over the last 3 weeks. And it starts with guys like Caden Glenn, who as a runner and a receiver, he's one of the best players probably in this section, not just the small leagues. He got 17 touchdowns this season. But it's not just him. A guy in quarterback Dobra, he's had 8 touchdowns combined over the last 2 weeks, and guys like Tarrant and Constantino as playmakers. The big question I have in this one, both these teams are playing really well. Valhalla's been the most complete team for a while. They haven't been in a close game, haven't really been tested. And now they go on the road against Putt Valley, and a guy like Caden Glenn playing the way that he does, this one is going to be such an interesting matchup for me. But I'm going to go with the road team here. I think Valhalla is going to win this game. It's going to be very close. Caden Glenn is a superstar. Some of these guys like Tarrant and Constantino have really stepped up along with Dobra. But the offensive line of Valhalla with that trio, the Earth, Wind, and Fire of Valhalla's offense, I think they're going to win this game in a tight one. And don't be surprised if this is not the last time these two teams meet. I'm going to go with Valhalla.
What's really interesting about this game is, I actually picked, I did pick Valhalla, which is obviously which is great. But I did pick Dobbs Ferry against Putt Valley, and clearly they blew the doors down on my pick, which is one of my 2 losses here. But when I'm looking at the overall season, how Valhalla has played the entire time, they have utterly dominated all facets of the game, right? Offensively, defensively, special teams. And I think for me, I know you're saying it's going to be a close game. I don't think it's going to be. I think Valhalla is on a roll. I think that they are. I know that Putt Valley has really a lot of talent. They are a top team in offense and defense. But Valhalla is a step ahead. And maybe I'm blowing too much smoke of Valhalla's rear end. But I think they are. I think right now they're showing that to be a class of dominance right now, and I feel like they're gonna end the season on a high note. And I think that they're gonna go into Putt Valley. I know the ride's a long run, but I just feel like overall they have a lot of talent, a lot of speed, a lot of explosiveness on all facets of the game, and I feel like they're gonna win in a big way. Maybe not a complete blowout or anything like we saw in the last few weeks, but I feel like they're gonna have a big win. I'm gonna go Valhalla.
All right, next up, CD matchup. We have Haldane 4-3 at Dobbs Ferry, who's 4-3. Dobbs Ferry is the number 3 seed, and they're going to play the loser of the Valhalla versus Putt Valley matchup. When I look at Dobbs Ferry, listen, offensively, they've scored 20-plus points in 2 out of the last 3 games. And for Haldane, they've scored 20-plus points in 2 out of the last 3 games. And Corliss and Thomas are really weapons as receivers. They can also run the ball on a bunch of jet sweep stuff. And Gogler is another guy who can run the football. At times, we've seen Haldane's offense kind of run into these stretches of, they can't stay on the football field, right? So Palace last week had 2 touchdowns. He didn't have to throw a lot. They won 35-0 versus Hastings. Defensively, they've been a pretty solid unit. But the question is now, when you look at Dobbs Ferry, who lost 62-35 at Putt Valley, I don't remember the last time Dobbs Ferry gave up that amount of points, right? I think that's got to be a historic struggle defensively. And again, they've allowed 97 points the last 2 weeks against Valhalla and Putt Valley. So what has happened to this Dobbs Ferry's defense? They need to rebound very quickly as we are on the brink of the playoffs. The good news is offensively, they're really strong. They have 4 games scoring 30-plus points, and they rebounded last week. I know Putt Valley blew them out, but they put up 35. It's just they couldn't stop a nosebleed. And in that case, listen, I think Dobbs Ferry with Harnett leading the way, Kearns being a big-time playmaker for them. I think they're going to put up points, and defensively, I do think they're going to rebound. I don't think they're going to pitch a shutout here, but I do think they rebound a lot better than they played the last 2 weeks. They are at home. I'm going to go with Dobbs Ferry to win this one and rebound defensively.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree with you. I feel like Dobbs Ferry was my pick last week, and mainly is because I felt like their defense was going to step up more than they did. And I just feel like I agree with you. I feel like they're going to be playing at home. They're going to have any team that really gets dominated or gets blown out. Usually they do not allow that to happen.
Well, that's what we thought last week, right? Dobbs Ferry got blown out now 2 straight weeks.
And so the question then is going to be, will it happen again? I just don't see it happening for a 3rd straight week. And Dobbs Ferry has, when you look at the top 2 teams right now, obviously with Putt Valley and Valhalla, they, in my opinion, are the next step, right? And granted, Haldane is a very good team too. I just feel like this is going to be a lot closer, but I'm also going to go with Dobbs Ferry, mainly because I feel like they're going to control the line of scrimmage, and I feel like they're going to own the time possession and just kind of wear down their opponent. And I'm going to go with Dobbs Ferry here.
Next up, the last one out of the CD group, we have Woodlands 1-7 at Tucko, who's 4-3. Woodlands lost 42-14 versus Valhalla last week. Tucko won 53-12 at Poughkeepsie. And listen, I'm going to go with Tucko. And offensively, I know they start off the season really slow. First game went well. They had an injury to their quarterback, which has kind of derailed things. But they have scored 40-plus points the last 2 games, and it is predicated on running the football. And Connolly and Baghetti have been big-time contributors in that. And this offensive line has really established themselves over these last couple of weeks, which we thought early on in the season that they would do. Now, defensively, 3 of the last 4 games, they've also allowed less than 14 points. So they played pretty good complementary football, and they're up against a Woodlands team that has allowed 30-plus points in 5 straight games, Mars. I just don't think they're playing good enough defensively to slow down the run game of Tucko, and I'm going to go with Tucko here.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Tucko. I agree with you. I feel like Woodlands has been struggling. They make a lot of mistakes on the offensive end. They give up a little bit too much points for me. I feel like Tuckahoe has been more consistent, and they've been scoring a lot of points. And I feel like because of the mistakes that obviously Woodlands has been doing, I just feel like Tuckahoe is going to win this game. All
right, Mars. Let's talk playoffs. Let's do it. Let's hit the playoff button now. We're going to start with the Hudson Valley Football League and then go all the way to AA. We'll also show a little bit of clips if YouTube doesn't destroy us like it did last time. Maybe it's the Section 1 guys. They're trying to put a blanket over the film.
A letter or something.
And so what we're going to do, guys, we're going to put this in the chat. If I know Mars has got his quick hands going, so he'll put the games in the chat. Let's talk about the first one. Who do you guys think is going to win? Answer them. Leave your bias at the door. Tell us honestly who you think. Let's start with Hudson Valley Football League, Mars. In the first matchup, the number 4 seed Peekskill, and let me put up their little schedule there. There it is. Number 4 seed Peekskill, who's 3-4, at the number 1 seed Tappan Z, who is 7-1. Now, these 2 teams have played already. Tappan Z won versus Peekskill. Week 1, they played 26-0. But let's talk about these 2 teams. And for Peekskill, last week, they lost 22-0 versus Greeley. And, they've had key wins versus Port Chester. They've played, Tappan Z, Panis, Greeley. Panis was a very close loss. Greeley and Tappan Z a little bit wider. And a big issue that they have, to me, is offensively. They're 6 out of the 7 teams in Hudson Valley Football League on offense, and they're last among the playoff teams in points scored. They have not scored over 14 points in 3 straight games. And so they're trying to get things done offensively. It is all predicated with running the football with Smythe, with Jacobs. This offensive line is really going to have their hands full in this one, Mars. I mean, turnovers, negative plays and turnovers have been a huge, huge issue for Peak. So even when they get the offense going, they run into this wall, which is this negative play. It's going to be a penalty. There's going to be a fumble. There's just way too much of that in recent weeks, which has really hurt them offensively. Now, defensively, this is a pretty strong group. They're number 3 in points allowed. They put a lot of pressure on you. They're going to play man coverage, but they want to generate those negative plays, get a lot of pressure on your quarterback, which leads to turnovers. Now, they have had some issues of stopping the run towards the outside, right? Because they start seeing these zombie blitzes. You're starting to see teams wash that down and then hit the outside for some big chunk plays and some quarterback runs. So definitely keep that in mind. And then when I look at Tappan Z, they won 51-8 versus Magnus. This is the number one offense in the Hudson Valley Football League going to the playoffs, Mars. They have scored 30-plus points in 5 straight games. Kavalen has really picked things up. He was 8 for 8 last week, and we've seen a plethora of wide receivers in Piccioni. We've seen Martinez, who had a kick return touchdown last week, Murray, Rubin, Kukla, all guys making plays. And then the running game with Tofa and this offensive line has really been a dynamic balance to this offense, Mars. Defensively, they're also number one in points allowed. They've allowed less than 14 points in 4 straight games, Mars. Keeperman and Hunt have been a force on that defensive line. I've given you the spiel, Mars. When I look at what Tappan Zee does, attack the outside, right? If I'm looking at Tappan Zee, what they can do against Peekskill, attack the outside on this defense, giving you the zombie looks, know where you're going as a quarterback, make sure you don't turn the ball over, right? That's going to be the big thing. Peekskill thrives on that. Don't give that offense extra possessions to find things, because I think defensively their front seven can control this game. Thoughts, Mars? And then we'll see who the people pick.
So you're going with Tappan Zee?
Well, I didn't make the pick yet. I just told you both teams. But I'm just telling you the keys on both sides.
Do you want me to pick my games? Or
I do. I want you to pick first. I gave you the spiel on both teams. Tell me who you think.
Yeah, you know what it is? You're banking on my pick, and you're going to see what I think.
I'm interested. I'm interested to see you and what the audience is doing right now.
I'll go first then. So, I mean, when you're looking at the playoffs, obviously every team is competitive. Every team is obviously going to be dangerous, especially when you get to this part of the season. And Peekskill defensively has been very aggressive, and they've been really tough to really play against, mainly because their speed has been really been able to gather a lot of pressure against teams, especially those trying to pass the ball. And they can make some big plays. And I do agree with you. One of the biggest weaknesses that Peekskill has on the defensive side is attacking the outside or defending the outside. And so teams a lot of times that would make those big plays will break contain, and then they can really get in some chunk yards. And unfortunately for Peekskill, Tappan Zee is one of those teams that can break the plane, and once they get an open field, it's really difficult to slow them down, right? And I feel like because of this, Tappan Zee all around has been a aggressive and just gritty team, right, throughout the entirety of the year. And a lot of teams did not think that they were going to be to that level, and they kind of just shook the league, right? And now, within the league play, because their only loss, I believe, was in the week 0 in the beginning of the year.
Yeah, they've won 7 straight, I believe.
And within the HVFL, they've shook the league and controlled it, right? So I feel like they've been on a roll. Not a lot of injuries from my records. And they just have been open field, been making a lot of plays in the offense, and defensively they've been putting a lot of pressure. And because of that, I'm going to go with Tappan Zee. I feel like they are just going to continue this momentum going forward. I have a feeling, and I don't like being that guy that foreshadows this going forward. I got a feeling it's going to be a Tappan Zee Greeley title game again.
Why are you picking the next game already? What are you doing?
I'm just saying. I'm itching it. So I'm just saying Tappan Zee. I feel like is that momentum swing. I'm going Tappan Zee.
Well, I'm agree with you. I'm going to go with Tappan Zee as well. Listen, you have the number one offense. You got the number one defense. They have played at a really, really high level throughout the season. And there hasn't been a lot of close games. They've been a real dominant force. I mentioned a number of different guys that have made plays for them throughout the season. All right, so I'm going Tappan Zee. And I think the audience also agrees. 75% is also going with Tappan Zee. All right, let's go to the next one, guys. And again, if you have any questions, shoot them in the chat. Make sure you hit that thumbs up. Hit that sub button if you haven't already. Share the feed if you guys think others are interested in our coverage. But let's go to the other playoff game in the Hudson Valley Football League. And that is the number 3 seed, Panis, who's 3-4, at the number 2 seed in Greeley, who is 6-1. Now, these two teams have played each other back in week 2, where Greeley won 34-14. And when you look at both these teams, and I'll give kind of like keys on both sides, Mars, and then you'll give your opinion, and then we'll pick the game, like we did the last one. But probably a little bit more smoothly. But for Panis, they lost. To me, a surprising loss last week, 22-21 at Port Chester. Greeley won 22-0 versus Peekskill. But for Panis, they were coming off a really impressive victory versus Peekskill. Offensively, we know this is an offense that can move the ball. They're 3 out of 7 in points scored out of the 7 Hudson Valley Football League teams. They scored 21 plus points in 3 games this year. At times, things have been a little mixed, but it starts with their quarterback in Ramos, who has made some really impressive plays in the past few weeks. He can throw the ball. At times, he can run the ball. We saw that against Peekskill. And Doherty is another one who's had some impressive run plays the last couple weeks. And they're going to have to rely on that duo. And then when they get to kind of these short distance scenarios, Generosi was this bigger back, downhill runner. They like to use him as well. But to me, when I look at offensively, they're going to have to get on the edge versus Greeley because I don't know if they can bang around in the tackles consistently. Again, you don't want this to be a track meet because that's the kind of game Greeley wants to play. But they do have to get on the edge, use some of their speed, use some of their explosiveness from Ramos, from Doherty, from some of these outside weapons. And when they played them last time, Mars, I thought they had some success in the quick game, right? Because, Ramos was really efficient with the ball. Don't turn the ball over. That's going to be a huge part of it. Now, defensively, they struggled versus the run last week. They gave up over 200 yards rushing last week. Defensively, they really struggled stopping Blakesley. I mean, he was absolutely killing them, and tackling was a major, major problem. When we go to the other side, thoughts on Panis, Mars, or you want me to talk about Greeley?
Yeah, I'll give my overall thoughts on both teams.
Yeah. For Greeley, offensively, this is the number 2 offense right behind the Tappan Zee. They average 30 points a game. And quarterback Osh is really leading the way. He had 6 total touchdowns the last 2 weeks. Blakesley is one of the best wideouts in the class. And that duo between Osh and Blakesley has been devastating for teams. Sal is another guy who I've seen him, make some plays throughout the season on offense. Question I have is, again, running the football. You know that Panis struggled stopping the run last week. They gave up, I believe, over 2 100-yard rushers last week. And so, Osh did a good job running the ball last week. Could they do a lot more quarterback runs? I think they can. And they really, getting the ball out of your hand quickly into Blakesley in space was something that really worked for this offense last time. I think you duplicated. Now, Panis bracketed Blakesley as much as they could. They threw a screen to him, right? That led to a touchdown. They gave him a jet sweep. So finding different ways to get him the ball, even though you're going to see him bracketed no matter probably where he goes, is going to be huge. And what could help is running the football with their quarterback in Osh. So I'm interested to see if they could do that. Defensively, listen, they've allowed less than 14 points in 3 straight games. Sala and Kaplo have been making plays for this defense. To me, stopping the big play. Again, let them nickel and dime all the way down the field if they can do it. You need to force them to be efficient, Panis. Don't give up the big play. Force them to be efficient, and then get your offense who can hit a lot of big plays and put up a lot of points. That's my spiel on both, Mars. As for my pick, I'll pick first this time. I'm going to go with Greeley. I think Greeley has kind of established himself as the second best team. I feel like this is going to be a pretty high-scoring game because Panis has showed that they can move the ball and they can score points. But I feel like Greeley just has too much. That duo of Osh and Blakesley is one of the best duos. But there are some other guys who can make some plays. So as you're trying to bracket Blakesley, it'll leave one-on-one opportunities for other guys that Greeley can take advantage of. And so I'm going to go with Greeley here. Thoughts and game pick, Mars?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you look at both these teams and they're a lot closer than I would look at Peekskill and Tappan Zee, and mainly because of the fact that, like you said, both teams have the ability to score points. Panis has been proven that they can score at will at times, and it's really going to be dependent on that run game between multiple different guys up front that can really been pushing people around. Defensively, they've struggled a little bit, and mainly against the run, but I think Greeley has been that offensive force and defensively. I mean, I agree with you. I said this in the last segment that they are the clear defined second team in my eyes when it comes to the overall entering into this playoffs. And I foreshadowed it or just told it last session.
Spoiled it.
But I'm gonna go with Greeley. I think that I think this is almost like a destiny fight that's gonna happen between Tappan Zee and Greeley again. I know that from the last time they fought, it was Tappan Zee had a big win against them, and obviously this is the game that we're all waiting to see in the HVFL. I think Osh has been fantastic all year round, and he's going to have to step up big time, not only just in this game, but obviously next week as well when we get there. But I think it's going to be dependent on the offense and how efficient they are. If they can continue to score at a high level, then I think their defense is going to be tough, and they're going to limit the amount of big plays from Panis. So I feel like Greeley's going to win this game.
All right, let's move now to B. And again, I'll throw up the B schedule here. We'll end now, and we'll start with the B playoff games. Probably need better visuals here, but this is the best I could do. I've taken this off of game day one. And again, don't worry if you guys miss anything.
We can blame Devaney for that. We can blame Devaney.
We'll blame my cutting, actually. I can't blame Devaney for that. But let's continue. And again, guys, if you haven't done so yet, hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button. We're going to be doing these flash polls on who you think are going to win these matchups. And so we'll talk about the next one. If you have any questions, also put it in the chat. Let's start with the first one. And you can see it already in the poll. We have the number 8 seed Nanuet, who's 3-4, at the number 1 seed Westlake, who is 7-0. When you look at historically, Mars, interesting number when I look back at it. These teams are 6-6 between the two programs on the last 12 matchups. Last time they played was in 2021, where Nanuet won. And when you look at the last week, Nanuet lost 28-21 at Byram Hills. Westlake won 21-0 versus Pleasantville. And when you look at these two teams, you know, for Nanuet offensively, we have seen it. It has been up and down throughout the year. They're 10th out of 15 teams in B in points scored heading into the playoffs. You know, we know it starts with the run game with Duffy, who's their most explosive guy, and then their downhill runner in Moran out of the wing T. So you know they want to run the football, and then Peterson throwing the ball out of play action is their best offense, staying ahead of the chains and then play action out of it. Now, last week, the offensive line, Mars, gave up a lot of pressure in the pass game. Peterson took a beating at times, which led to a lot of mistakes, which led to negative plays and drives being stalled. Now, they did hit big plays, right? They scored 21 points, but there were opportunities for more, but they gave up a lot of pressure. And so this offensive line now, facing a tough Westlake defensive front, has to be better. They have to, again, move their feet. They can't allow the amount of penetration that they did last week. And so that's going to be huge because they have to hit plays off of play action. I don't think you can just run the ball right at Westlake all night long. It's not going to happen. They're going to have to get the ball to guys like Duffy out of play action, throwing it to them, throwing it to some of these weapons out there. They got to get some chunk plays because I just think running the ball out of your wing T offense for a full 4 quarters is not sustainable. Now, defensively, this group is pretty strong. They're 4th in points allowed. They did give up some big plays, which hurt them, and at times it's hurt Nanuet. We saw them in their loss versus Pleasantville, Mars. Big plays. If they can limit big plays, this defense has shown that they could be tough to move on consistently. But they gave up, when I look back at it, long gains that led to touchdowns. I think it was like 2 or 3 of them to Byram Hills, which all led to touchdowns. So, you know, Diffley, Diamadeo, Duffy, these guys are really going to have to slow down this rush attack, and really the Westlake getting towards the outside because they have a lot of speed and elusiveness. So they have to make sure that this game is played between the tackle box throughout the 4 quarters. For the other side, for Westlake, listen, they've been extremely impressive. Probably one of the biggest surprise teams of the year throughout Section 1. And offensively, they have scored 21-plus points, Mars, in 5 straight games. This is a consistent group, and this is another wing T offense. So if you're a fan of wing T football, you're going to get plenty of it in this one. Now, they'll do wing T, and then they'll do some spread as well. But Nick DiNapoli is really leading the way. And even when teams really focus in on taking him away, you have some of these other backs who can step up and make plays for him. Hud is someone who has stood out. Zino, Pippo, and then their quarterback in Lingeza, who, I didn't think played his best game last week, but still, him running out of the spread, he's a guy who can scramble. He puts a lot of pressure on your defense that even when you take away his routes, he's a guy who can take off. And they even did some design kind of quarterback blast last week. So multiple guys who can make plays for you, and this offensive line that is physical, right? So this rush attack can come right after you. Again, and defensively, they've had shutouts in 3 of the last 4 games. This defensive front 7 really puts a lot of pressure on you. And this secondary had 3 INTs last week, 4 turnovers total, including 1 for a touchdown. So this is a well-rounded football team, Mars. If they could play a clean game offensively, I think they're going to win this, and I think win it pretty handily. I'm going to go with Westlake. They're at home, like I mentioned. They're playing much consistent football. They turned the ball over last week. Offensively, they did not play a clean game. But defensively, they really got after it. If they can just limit the rush attack of Duffy and Moran, force Nanuet to be a passing team for, again, if Nanuet's throwing it over 15 times, Nanuet's in trouble, in my opinion. So if they can get that, I think that they're going to be in good shape, and that's what I think is going to happen. I'm going to go with Westlake.
This game is interesting mainly because Nanuet plays more of a downhill run game than some other teams in B do, and I feel like they stick to that classic wing T style football that a lot of people that it's actually interesting. A lot of teams are actually going back to that in more prevalence and throughout Section 1. But I feel like the biggest problem that Nanuet has is that their offense has just been inconsistent with trying to score a lot of points. I feel like they've been their best benefit is to have a rainy day, right? To drain the clock, get ahead of the chains, and just try to overpower an opponent. But unfortunately, Westlake is not an opponent that really can be pushed around. They have a very aggressive front. They are very gritty, right? And they have a lot of speed to them. And I feel like you saw that last week. You see that throughout the entirety of the year. And they have a lot of different ways in which they can attack you. But I feel like what's really impressive about Westlake is that they really just have a plethora of guys that can make plays. And I feel like that's really going to be a tough thing for Nanuet's defense to slow down, even though their defense has been pretty solid throughout the year. Yeah. Westlake has just been that underdog team. And now they're not the underdogs. Now they're the top team that everyone knows is a good team. They're a top C team. And so now, I feel like Westlake's going to win this game. I'd be very surprised if Nanuet were to pull off an upset here. I'm going to go Westlake.
All right. And the audience agrees 100% for Westlake. So, let's go to the next one, Mars, and a rematch. I mean, you're going to see some games, and this is one of them where teams playing each other for the second time. So last one, they didn't play each other, but this game, they did. This is a rematch, and that is the number 5 seed Byram Hills, who is 6-2, at the number 4 seed Pleasantville, who is 3-4. And these guys played 2 weeks ago, so feels like just yesterday. But they played in week 6. Where Byram, it was a very entertaining game, but Byram Hills won 26-22. They got ahead 20-0, like right out of the gate. I think at the end of the first quarter, and it was 20-5 at half. And then you saw Pleasantville claw its way back in the second half, take the lead in the fourth, and then Byram scoring on a punt return touchdown to pull off the upset. And I think it was a massive one. I think it kind of clinched the playoffs for Byram Hills. So that was a massive victory there. And when you look at last week, Byram Hills won 28-21 versus Nanuet. So again, they have they're on a nice little streak here. Pleasantville lost 21-0 at Westlake. And I'll give my spiel on both teams, which for Byram Hills, let me just say this. They had 3 wins last year, right? And before the year, I give my kind of predictions. Preseason prediction was right before the section title game. I'll reveal to anyone who's not on Patreon. If you're a Patreon member, you saw my way too early predictions in August. Some of them I was pretty awful at, but some I was not. And Byram Hills is one of them. I said Byram Hills was going to have a real bounce back year this year, getting at least 5 wins. They got their 6th win. So a very impressive, nice, turnaround for them from a year last year that they really struggled. And, they've won 4 straight games. Offensively, they've moved up to number 5 out of 15 school in points scored per game. They have scored 26 plus points in 4 straight games. And this is, again, the last now week and a half without their starting quarterback. So Baskin got hurt in that Pleasantville game. I saw him in a boot last week when I was watching them versus Nanuet. So it doesn't look like, that's changing. So they had their backup quarterback in Padley, I believe the young man's name is, last week. And this offense still produced. And big plays over the last 2 weeks have been huge for Byram Hills. About Tyler Marscott, he is an absolute stud at the wide receiver spot. They also put him in the Wildcat. They also give him some jet sweeps, him as a returner. Right, Mars? I mean, he is a big-time playmaker. And Leff has also been such an important two-way player for them. He had 2 touchdowns last week. Bordini has had some big plays. The question that I have is they hit a lot of big plays. They want to get Marscott the ball multiple different ways. So obviously that's going to be a priority against this Pleasantville defense, is hitting big plays and getting Marscott the ball. But can they limit the mistakes? And I reached out to coach to talk about this matchup, and that was the thing he pointed out: penalties and turnovers. Byram Hills has to avoid that offensively for them to have a chance to win this. Now on defense, they're 9 out of 15 in points allowed. They have given up a lot of big plays as well, including last week. And even in their matchup versus Pleasantville, they've given up big plays. But this has been an aggressive force. They forced turnovers, Mars. They've had 2+ turnovers in back-to-back weeks. And Peta, Nazaj, Farrell, all been making plays out there. So to me, I think you're going to see a similar scheme that they do go against Pleasantville. If you're coming out with a tight end, you're coming out with 2 tight ends, you're going to see 8 or 9 guys in the box. And they're going to say, we want you to throw out of these heavy sets because we have to take away the run game. That to me is what Byram Hill is on side. That in my prediction. For Pleasantville, offensively, they're 12 out of 15 in points scored. It's the lowest amongst the playoff teams in B coming into the playoffs. And so we know that it's going to be a run-heavy scheme, right? Sadow, who has been really good, even with the messed up hand, when he doesn't fumble, he's been really solid running the football. Now, again, you're going to get Sadow. You can get a mix of Reach probably on some of these jet sweeps and some Hadzinski in the backfield. But, the big question I have is this pass attack, because we've seen high moments and we've seen some really low moments. And they've had 6 turnovers over the last 2 weeks. And it's not just the quarterback, but fumbling the ball as well. 6 turnovers the last 2 weeks for Pleasantville is unacceptable. That's how you lose games. And so that's the big question to me is offensively, are we going to see 2 tight end runs? If you get those 2 tight ends, you're going to get 8 or 9 man boxes. Do you try to condense them and then run to the outside with Sadow, who has some good speed to him, right? Or are you going to go into kind of more spread and run out of the spread to get these looser boxes to create a little bit more space for your running backs? So that's going to be a big question to me. And passing, hitting some deep shots out of these condensed formations is going to be huge. But their quarterbacks have to protect the football. That's got to be the number one thing. They had 3 INTs last week. One of them was for a touchdown, right? That can't happen. Defensively, again, it's the big plays. If they can prevent the big plays, this defense has shown to be pretty strong unit. Last time they played, Mars, I just want to give you against Byram Hills. They gave up 4 plays of over 30 yards that led to touchdowns. I mean, that's the difference. They gave up 3 30-plus yard plays on offense and then the punt return. So 4 plays that defense and special teams gave up over 30 yards last time they played Byram Hills. If they prevent big plays, they win this game. And so that's kind of the big thing I'm looking at. They have to bracket Marscott, right? I mean, that to me is the big thing. Mars, you're not picking the game, but give me your thoughts on this matchup for both teams.
Yeah, I feel like Byram Hills was obviously a very gritty team, and they obviously were fighting for that playoff spot, and they won the games they needed to win, and they earned it, right? They got themselves in the playoffs. They got themselves a higher seed than what they were already kind of intended to. And Marscott's obviously a very good athlete, and he has the ability to make plays out of nothing. And last time these 2 teams played each other, Marscott essentially called game, right? He said,
did on the punt return, yeah.
Take this to the house, and he did, right? When I'll be honest, when all hope was lost, Byram Hills lost the lead, right, from a 20 to what, 5 half, right? And they lost the lead, and it looked like all was done. And Marscott said, "I'm calling game," and he called it, right? And I think that shows the grittiness of this team. And like you said, they're trying to take away the run. And for Pleasantville, it feels like one of those things where they have to learn how to finish a game, right? They have several games this year where they had the game won and they struggled to close it out. Whether it was the game against Pearl River that they struggled to close out, it was the game obviously against Byram Hills they struggled to close out. And it's like these are moments where you have to play a clean game, and if you could do that, then it's over. One thing I will say is that there is a lot of animosity right now between both programs, whether it's the storming of the field.
They did.
Taking the photos of the scoreboard after the game was over, like it was the Super Bowl. There's a lot of animosity right now, and all I can say is that it's going to be a real interesting game when Friday comes around, because there's not really a lot of love between the towns, not a lot of love between the players. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, it was a physical and nasty game, and yes, Byram Hills pulled off the upset, and we had the audience and the fans storm the field, which I haven't seen a away fan storm a field before. So that was something new that I haven't seen. But I will say this: Byram Hills is a gritty team. They have grinded things out, even though they give up big plays on defense at times. they have really done a good job of forcing turnovers. So that's kind of the caveat is, yes, you'll hit some big plays on us, but we're going to attack the football and force some turnovers. Offensively, I really like how they've turned things offensively. They have been a pretty efficient offense, and it's multiple guys contributing to that. However, beating a team twice is very difficult to do. Beating a team twice on the road is even harder to do. And with that, Pleasantville, to me, if I mentioned the big plays, if you limit them to half of those big plays, you win the football game. And so for me, I do think Pleasantville playing at home, playing this team for a second time in 3 weeks, I think the edge goes to Pleasantville. I think defensively, you're going to see them probably do a better job because they blew multiple coverage. 2 times, I think they blew coverage to Marscott. That can't happen. I can't imagine that happening again. They're going to try to take away and bracket Marscott. I think that, again, it's going to limit some of the big plays that Byron Mills has. I think Pleasantville wins this game. They don't turn the ball over as much. I am going to go with Pleasantville. And it's a 50-50 tie from chat, which is pretty crazy. Again, I think this is going to be a good game. This is going to be, I think, a very interesting one.
Yeah.
Guys, hit that thumbs up. Hit that sub button if you haven't already. Make sure you guys get involved in those flash polls. We're doing the B playoffs. We'll go to the next one. And if you have any questions, throw it in the chat, guys, as always. So let's go to the next B matchup. And that is number 7 seed Rhinebeck, who's 4-3, at the number 2 seed Bronxville, who's 7-0. Historically, Mars, Bronxville is 8-1 versus Rhinebeck. I said Rhinebeck, right? I didn't. I said Rhinebeck. I'm sorry. But the last time they played was in 2021. And so when I look at these two teams, again, Rhinebeck won 35-15 at Irvington. Bronxville won 34-0 versus Edgemont. And what I'll say is this for Rhinebeck, really nice season to this point for them. They had a really good year last year. They missed the playoff by 1 game, right? They had to win that. It was a win or go home game as the last game of the season last year, and they lost, which knocked them out of the playoffs. But, this year they're in it. And Coach talked about how it's a really nice moment for this program, and it is, because they've had back-to-back seasons with at least 4 wins for the first time, Mars, since 2018 and 2019. So a nice feel-good moment for the program, but now you're playing Bronxville, and you're going to Bronxville. So there's a lot on your plate here. And offensively, listen, they could be a bit inconsistent. They run the wing T offense. I really like the play-action game that they use, Mars, with kind of it's a bit of a run-pass option. So they do a play action, they get their quarterback out on the edge, and their wide receiver kind of takes off down the field just to pull that corner, because if the corner stays in the flats, right, to try to stop the quarterback, or that edge defender doesn't get around, the quarterback can either run or he can throw it deep. And they've done a really good job multiple times this year that I've seen them of utilizing that. I mean, last week they had a 49-yard touchdown pass and a 31-yard touchdown run from the quarterback spot. So they can make some of these play-action plays against Bronxville because they're going to need to, because running against Bronxville is very difficult, especially between the tackles. So they're going to have to hit play-action. They're going to have to get to the outside. But defensively, this has been a strong defensive, scrappy group. They're 5th in points allowed out of 15 schools in B, and they have a cast of guys that can really get around the ball. I mean, they've allowed only 3 games this year where they've allowed more than 20 points. So this has been a really strong group. But can they stop the run? Can they match the physicality of Bronxville up front is a big question to me. Because when I look at Bronxville, this is the number 1 offense in points scored in B. They have 5 games scoring 30-plus points. The physicality of the offensive line and tight end group, Mars, is overwhelming. I mean, they can really push people at the point of attack. And that combo of Patterson and Formato have been devastating to stop. I mean, when they get going, they're an automatic. They've been almost an automatic 4 yards a run. Like at least 4 yards, right? So it's hard to get negative plays off of them. And then they do the play action to their tight ends, to guys like Napoltini, to Cagmeni. It's a tough offense to stop with because they can dominate the trenches. And defensively, this is also the number 1 defense in points allowed. They have 3 shutouts, Mars, in only 1 game. They've allowed more than 10 points by an offense. This defensive line with McSherry, Kelty, Moore, the linebackers are a load to run against. And if they could stop the outside run against Rhinebeck, I don't know how the Rhinebeck offense is going to move a lot. I mean, I'm going to go with Bronxville. They just got too much. They run the ball with a lot of physicality. They can bully. They can play bully ball and just beat you up. And then that defensive front 7 puts so much pressure on you. And if you get down, you have to start throwing the football. They get a lot of pressure on you. The secondary attacks the football. It causes turnovers. I just think as scrappy as Rhinebeck has been, nice feel-good story, but they're going up against a Bronxville team that is loaded, that can run the football, and I think it's too much for Rhinebeck. I'm going Bronxville.
Yeah, the biggest thing I notice about Rhinebeck is that they are a gritty team, right? They're gonna scrap, they're gonna fight, and all year long, right? And you said it's a feel good season, right? That they've been able to battle their way into the playoffs, and their defense has really been kind of carrying them along the way. And their offense has struggled; they've been inconsistent, but they've made some big plays when they needed to, right? And I feel like, as much as I would love to say that Rhinebeck is going to win this game because I got to ride with Rhinebeck. I just don't think it's possible. I think Bronxville has got the size, they've got the athleticism, they offensive and defensively look like the most dominant team in B right now. I feel like they just are hitting in all cylinders, right? And no matter if they're playing against teams like Edgemont who struggle, or they're playing against teams like Ardsley or Pleasantville or whoever it may be, you're playing against all these talented teams, and you're coming away still number one in everything. And I just feel like they are on a momentum swing that's been pushing them forward, and I just feel like they're playing at home. I'm going to go Bronxville here. Let's
go to the last matchup in B. And again, it was, 80% for Bronxville? Yeah, I figured. But there is that lone vote out there. Who out you? Someone from Rhinebeck Nation out there. But let's go to the last matchup. And that is the number 6 seed Ardsley, who's 3-4, at the 3 seed Pro River, who's 7-1. And how about this, Mars? They played last week. It's a quick turnaround. You're playing a team in 8 days, 9 days, because they played Thursday, right? So it's like an 8-9 day turnaround playing the same team. That is hard to do. And last time they played, Pro River won a really good game, 21-14. And again, when I look at these two teams, for Ardsley, boy, they have had some brutal losses this year. They have lost late in the fourth quarter has been a big story for this team. All 4 losses this year, Mars, have been by 7 or less points. And the key factor in all those losses, which I know Coach brought up when I reached out to him, is turnovers. I think I've had at least 2 turnovers in each one of those losses. And when they don't turn the ball over, they win games, right? That's kind of big, and that's like a story for every team. But for Ardsley specifically, they have 2+ turnovers a loss. And it's been killer turnovers that have taken away points or have given points to the other team. And when you look at them offensively, they're 9 out of 15 in points scored. And it starts with running the ball with Dulcine, who is a stud. You get to that second level, there's not a lot of people who can catch him. So the big thing to him is if you can let him break that initial rush on defense, get him to that second level, and get him into a track meet, that's the kind of rush attack that Ardsley wants. They want to get Dulcine in space. And so that's going to be the big thing, is running with him. The quarterback Kaplan had 2 touchdowns last time they played Pearl River. One of them was passing, one of them was running. And what I like that they did, Mars, they came out with some condensed formations against Pearl River, and they threw out of it. They did play action out of it, because you're going to see these loaded boxes, which is going to give you one-on-one opportunities, throwing it to guys like Fiore, throwing it to guys like Francis. But they had another 2 turnovers last week, and one of them was at the goal line, Mars, going into the end zone, right? So it took away points. So again, those are like the big difference makers for this offense. Showing that balance, it starts with running the ball and then play action out of that with these condensed formations. They also had some success when they went to the spread, some of the quick game against Pearl River. So that kind of style, I think you're going to see similar stuff in this one, because how much do you change, right? How much do you scheme up against this team? You're playing them the following week. You'll see how they lined up against you, and now you can make some adjustments, but you're not going to see wholesale adjustments because, again, you played them 1 week ago. There's not a lot of change here besides some adjustments on what you did. Could you add a little more wrinkles? That's probably the most you're getting, right? So to me, I think you'll see some similar stuff defensively. Has to do with limiting the run. When Pearl River comes out with a tight end with 2 backs, I know you're going to see these 5-man fronts, these loaded boxes, and kind of rely on their secondary to play man. And they also taking away, because Pearl River has a young quarterback in Lanise who has kind of taken a lot of reps, take away his first read, right? At times, Lanise made some mistakes last week. When he took away his first read, now he starts to scramble. Now he starts again. He's a very aggressive quarterback, wants to hit the deep ball. So this secondary can have some opportunities. They can generate some pressure and take away that first read from him. it can lead to some negative plays. As for Pearl River, when you look at, again, they're the higher seed to the 3 seed, similar to what we saw last year, right, Mars? They were a high seed going into B last year. They got upset by Lakeland last year. So interested to see, similar situation. They are at home. Offensively, this has been a strong offense. They're 4th out of 15 in points. And no, it starts with Amundsen, who's been really good this year. He had a touchdown reception last week, but he's had some fumbles. I mean, fumbles have kind of been an issue for Pearl River, and he's had some fumbles this year that have been pretty brutal. Now, sometimes they've escaped from it, but sometimes it's been very costly. And their quarterback, Lanise, who, big guy, young guy, really has a nice arm. He had 2 passing touchdowns last week, had a pretty brutal interception. He also had the game-winning rushing touchdown. So you've seen some real sparks from this young man playing. Carlacci had a touchdown reception. Graziano's a nice safety valve for them. When you look at offensively, they're also another run-first, play-action out of that. And they want to hit the deep ball because Lanise has a really strong arm. The only thing I'll say, though, and I mentioned it with Ardsley, is just that they have to be smart, right? Take what the defense gives you. Because sometimes Ardsley they're going to bait you into trying to force something. And that's when you saw this defense cause a couple turnovers and have opportunities to cause turnovers. So the big thing for me is if they can run the football. Some of them have the condensed formations, play action out of the condensed formations. Again, trying to attack them when you see the one-on-one matchups, attack them deep. But when they're playing off, take what the defense gives you, right? Don't force the football. And for defensively, this is the number 3 defense in B, Mars, in points allowed. Starts with stopping the run. I mentioned about it. I reached out to coach. He talked about it. They have to slow down Dulcine is obviously the number 1 thing. And again, you're going to see this defensive line and their linebackers and like Guzman is really going to have to lead the way. They have to be super active in this one. And again, they forced a couple turnovers last week. So this is a strong defensive unit. Mars, I know I talked a lot. I do have some film I want to talk to, but talk about both these teams, and then we'll do some film and show the game.
Yeah, I mean, this game is probably the most intriguing of all the games in B for me. I mean, I know that probably the next top one would be Pleasantville Byram Hills, but I feel like the reason why is because not only did these teams play last week, but they've been very competitive, right? And both these teams either can show out and show that they can be a dominant team in B, or they struggle. Like even looking at Ardsley, and they barely lost to Bronxville by a touchdown,
Yep.
right? And Bronxville has been dominating everybody, and Ardsley has always been that gritty, tough team that has just always kept them in games. But it feels like I'm watching the New York Jets and can't find ways to close out the game itself with Ardsley. So, I feel like it's like they can be competitive with everybody, but it's about closing games out. And in Pearl River, it's like you have all these weapons. You have these guys that can really dominate the game. It's about turnovers. It's about being consistent. And I feel like both sides have their strengths for sure, but they both have their major weaknesses that cause them to lose these tight games.
Yeah, and for the film session, guys, I just want to show, again, Ardsley's defense and Pearl River's pass attack with Lanise last week when they played each other, and just kind of little snippets on what to look for. And so, and you guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah, you're all good.
Perfect. And let's start with Ardsley's defense. And a big thing I mentioned on what you might see, again, this week, when Pearl River comes out with a tight end, they have a tight end right, 2 backs, right? This one is right behind the tackle. Now, you're going to see these 5-man fronts, right? Ardsley's thinking, hey, we got to take away the run. We got to give some guys on the line of scrimmage. And Pearl River did some smart stuff, right? They went weak. So they have the tight end right. You have this guy right in his face. You have a safety over the top of that tight end. But they'll run weak, kind of like these ISO plays, right? So you're going to see they got 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, and Pearl River's going to attack weak. So you're going to see they're going to do a cross block right here where the tackle blocks down, the guard pulls and kicks out, and this H-back is attacking that linebacker. And what I like about Ardsley's defense, they're a scrappy group. They can get off blocks really well, and even when things look like they're open right at the initial point, they close pretty good, right? So you can see right now it looks pretty good, right? You have pretty good angle blocks right here. Everyone on somebody. Don't duck your head. That's a good, for that H-back. Don't duck your head when you're blocking. That's how you miss or you get hurt, right? But watch how this defense, again, you're going to see them swarm. You're going to see them get off blocks, right? It looks pretty good openly, but now look at this Ardsley defense closing, right? Probably would have been a 5 or 6 yard game, but look at this defense close again. Look at them attack the football, and there's a fumble on the ground. And we've seen that with Amundsen at times. Ardsley, knowing they're attacking the football, they group tackle here. The defensive lineman, that's, I think, Speckman right there. Look at him force that fumble. Look at the big man, Mars. You love seeing that. Running towards the sideline, falls on top of that. Love that. So look at them swarm, get off blocks. You're going to see those 5-man fronts, and that's what they want to do, take away the run attack. That's the number one priority. The second thing I saw, watching was that, Ardsley did a pretty solid job taking away the first read of the quarterback at times. And so you see now they're going to come out and spread. 3 receivers left, 1 receiver to the right. And the big thing that Ardsley wants to do is create some confusion for the quarterback, take away his first read. And so you're going to see the combination here. That outside receiver is going to do a 10-yard in. His number 2 is going to do a corner. The number 3 receiver is going to do a quick out. And I think the target right here is his outside receiver. They want to hit this in-breaking route because that's where the quarterback starts looking right away. And so as the ball gets snapped, you're going to see they're going to run into a zone coverage here where they have a flat defender as his first force guy. The safety, I believe, is in quarter coverage, and this linebacker is going to drop the hook to curl zone. So it's going to be super important. If you're going to take away a 10-yard dig, you're going to need this linebacker and this flat defender to get some depth. And they do that, right? Look at the depth here. You see the flat guy got some depth. The linebacker opens his hips. He's trying to get some depth. Now, the quarterback probably has this flat. He could throw it right away. But again, I mentioned Lenise, he's a pretty aggressive quarterback. He wants to hit some of these deeper routes. So you see Ardsley getting depth here, taking that first read away. And now they take away that first read, right? You see the in-breaking route starting to come in. There's no one there. Now the defensive line starts to get pressure. Right? He starts to get pressure, flushes him out of the pocket. And look at the coverage out here. Like Lenise is starting to scramble. He's starting to look for somebody. Again, I mentioned he's an aggressive quarterback. I love the coverage from Francis here. Look at him shadowing him. He's trying to throw it to him because he sees the corner's back to him. Watch the corner whip his head around. Boom, leads to an INT. Great coverage. Great job by the defense taking away that first read, and it leads to a turnover. But when I look at Pearl River, and again, there's some real impressive stuff here. They come out with a tight end, 2 backs again, right? It's signaling, hey, we're going to try to run the ball. Ardsley comes out with 5 men on the line of scrimmage, like we've seen. But they're going to run play action at it, right? So you see the single receiver to the right. He's the flanker with the tight end to the right. And again, because of this 2 backs with the tight end, you're going to see the safety wants to be aggressive towards the run. So again, they're going to do play action here. They're going to get a fullback to the flats, but they're really going to target this outside guy who they think they have a one-on-one matchup. And again, this young man's got an impressive arm. There's the quick play action. You can see the safety stepped up first. It means, hey, towards the sideline, we got space. And watch this throw right here. Again, pressure starting to come. Look at the throw. Boom, right there. I mean, this is pretty good coverage. But that is great placement by the quarterback right at the pylon. Great catch, keeping the feet in. That's a touchdown. Beautiful throw. Now, I mentioned, again, there were some mistakes last week that we saw because, again, Ardsley trying to take away that first read. But there were some good moments as well, right? Knowing where your safety valves are. This is a great example. They have 3 receivers to the left, 1 to the right. They're going to run a fake screen here, a fake jailbreak, and they're really trying to throw to that receiver, number 2 receiver going deep, right? That's the initial play. Ardsley does a good job of taking this away here. Again, he's trying to give a little fake to this in-breaking guy and throwing it to the number 2 receiver. But watch the secondary. They do a really good job of adjusting here, and they take it away. So that first read's gone. Now look at the pressure. Got a D lineman right there. Lenise is big and strong. He breaks out of this first one. But again, don't force things. Find your safety valve. And he does. It's just a running back right down here. He sees the safety valve. Look at him toss it to him, get hit. And this leads to a massive play and a huge part of this game. They were down 7, 2 minutes left. And because he finds a safety valve, he didn't force it deep, leads to this long touchdown. Those are the kind of things that are going to be so important for this young quarterback. Don't force things. Take what the defense gives you, right? There's times to be aggressive and there's times to find your safety valve. And he did that, led to a huge play. All right, Mars, who do you got winning and why?
Yeah, see, this game was always really interesting to me, mainly because, like I said before, these 2 teams have been very gritty throughout the entirety of the season. And I feel like they're actually kind of evenly matched to a certain extent. And you could see that in the last game they played against each other. But I just feel like they've always been a very consistent competitive teams throughout B. This game, I mean, like I said before, this game I have been on and off with. And maybe I'm going to take a gamble here. But I'm actually going to go with Ardsley. And I think that Ardsley's going to pull the upset. I think they're going to finally settle and they're finally going to finish a game when it gets really close. And I feel like when you play a team back to back, not even giving a rest, you're playing a team right after you just played them. I'm sure there's a lot of bitterness, there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of scheming going on where they're going to say, we know exactly what they are doing. We know exactly what they want to do against us, and now they have almost the advantage a little bit, right? When you lose, sometimes it actually helps you in the long run. Like, yeah, you lost the battle, but you're trying to win the war, right? And I feel like for Ardsley, they are a very gritty team. Yes, their offense has struggled, but their defense is really what has been keeping them in games a lot of times. And I feel like they're going to be really tough this week. They're going into Pearl River, who obviously is a great team. But I just feel like Ardsley, I think, is just going to have the edge. They just lost. They have that defensive edge on them. They're very aggressive. And I just feel like they're going to keep this game close. But the big difference is they're actually going to close the game and win this time. So I'm going to go Ardsley. I'm going to be a little gamble here. I'm going Ardsley in a close game.
It's not a gamble, Mars. I agree with you. I'm going to go with Ardsley. I think this is the upset out of the B league right here. I think Ardsley is going to win. Listen, Pearl River is a very good team. I think they had a scare. They had to score 2 touchdowns very late to beat this Ardsley team. Ardsley, again, having opportunities and missing out on them has been a trend, which makes things, again, gives me a little bit of agita because when you do it multiple times, it's a trend, right? It's not a random event anymore. So they definitely need to limit the turnovers. That is obviously going to be key, but I think they do. And I think you're going to see Ardsley pull the upset. All right, that was B. 83% has Pearl River in this one, Mars. So don't agree with us there. But let's move now to A. And again, as we move, guys, if you haven't done so yet, make sure you hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button. And again, we're doing the flash polls in chat, so if you want to get involved there, choose who you think is going to win. And let's start with the first matchup. And that is the number 3 seed Mayapack, who's 5-3, at the number 2 seed Harrison, who's 4-3. And an interesting thing, Mars, this is the third time that they met in the first round of the playoffs, right? Yeah, last 2 years they have, and this is the third time. So 3 straight years that they have met in the first round of the playoffs. Harrison has won the last 2 playoff matchups. But I will say this. Both teams are coming into this game struggling, in my opinion. Mayapack lost 14-0 at Clarkstown South. They have lost 2 out of the last 3 games. Harrison lost 24-0 at Rye. They have lost 2 straight games. Now, I know people are going to say, well, Harrison has played Somers and Rye. I get that. But I'm going to talk about why there's some serious concerns. But let's start with Mayapack. And listen, offensively, they're 5th in A in points scored out of 13 schools. Their formula. They're going to run the ball with Clifford and some other backs downhill with their big offensive line. I mean, you guys got Varley, you have Trinchilla, you have Bentavega. You have multiple big guys. They'll rotate some guys on that offensive line, but they have some big dudes up front who can push people around. And I even think last week they lost 14. They didn't score a point, but they were able to run the ball. I mean, they were getting 4+ yards a clip, and I think they stopped running the ball a little too early, and they struggled passing it. They tried to do a lot of play action pass. They tried to go into the spread, doing some RPO stuff. I think you'll still see that. But this team runs the football first, condensed formations. They'll do blasts. They'll run in between the tackles and also give you condensed and run outside. But that's kind of their mainstay. And then defensively, they're 8 out of 13 in points allowed. It's last amongst the playoff teams. So an interesting tidbit is the top 8 defenses in points allowed have made the playoffs. So you have to play defense to make the playoffs in A. Mayapack is last out of those playoff teams in points allowed. And it's led by their defensive line in Varley, who is an absolute monster. He moves at D tackle. They moved him a lot to D end, but he is a game wrecker. And the size, the ability to anchor down and stop the run is key for them. But if Varley if Varley's not disrupting things, you can move the ball against this team. So a big thing for them is, hey, the other guy's stepping up, because I really think Varley has been carrying things at times. So for me, on offense, You know what the formula is. But for defense, going against Harrison, it's about stopping the run. That's obviously the key factor, right? For them is to stop the run. That's the thing. But the issue is 2 out of the last 3 games they have lost, Mars, and they have started games, and all 3 very slow. They come out pretty flat. They don't get going for a while, and even against John Jay, they were tied against John Jay Cross River going into half. They really needed a strong second half to win the game. They have started games very slow. Now for Harrison, who, if you saw on Devaney's preview show for A, I chose to go to the section title game. So this might sound harsh, but I'm doing this because I have respect for this team. But they need an exorcism on offense, Mars. They're 12 out of 13 in points scored. They are last among the playoff team in points scored. They have 1 game scoring over 7 points out of their last 4. Now I know the last 2 games against Somers and Rye. I get it. But they looked the worst out of the playoff teams playing Somers and Rye offensively. I mean, against Rye last week, Mars, I think they had 8 yards on offense in the first half. And, a lot of people, I've gotten messages on, what is the issue here? And it's not one thing. It's multiple things. And I know Joe Krupe, who broke his foot earlier in the year, he's a massive loss. Now, will he play in this game? I don't know. I mean, Coach, at the end of Rye, I think he was asked about it, and he said he wasn't sure. So I'm sure they know now, right, on Thursday, the day before the game, but I have no idea. And if he comes back, obviously that's a big boost. But being out that long, there's going to be rust there. It's everyone else who has to step up. I think they went to Lanza at quarterback a little bit late last week. He was parked at wide receiver a lot. And again, if he's not getting the ball at wide receiver, move him into the backfield. Move him at the quarterback spot, right? To me, those are probably some of the big things. But this offensive line, they got to play better, right, as a group. And they got some guys I have a lot of respect for. I mean, Belidamaj, to me, is a front runner for Defensive Player of the Year. They got Haynes, who's a veteran, 2-way player. To me, it's like, hey, we got some veterans on this offensive line. It's time for them to take the mantle and say, hey, we're going to dominate up front. If we're going to turn this offense around, we're going to be opening up holes for whatever back is back there. Lanza, Olsey, Krupe, anyone. Right? That's where it starts. This offensive line is, hey, we're going to drive people off the ball, win at the point of attack, and then these running backs, whether it's their quarterback in Badner, who's had some struggles, whether it's Olsey, whether it's Dante Lanza, whoever running the ball, they got to run hard. Because I've seen on tape at times, they're getting tackled right at the point of attack by one guy, right? They're kind of unsure if they should hit the whole out or should they be a little bit more patient. Everyone needs to play with a bigger sense of urgency on offense, right? So you're going up against a big defensive line in Mayapack. They gave up 200 yards rushing last week against Clarkstown South. Can you run against them? Yes, but you have to make sure that Varley's blocked. And you're going to get some heavy looks. You got to keep them honest. You got to be, again, get out on the edge, whether it's Badner, whether it's Dante Lanza. You have to be able to complete some passes. To me, it's just, hey, a group effort of trying to turn things around. People keep asking, what's the big issue? Is it the O-line? Is it the running back? Is it the quarterback? It's everyone's got a hand in it, right? So that's going to be the big thing. Defensively, Mars, it's still a strong group. They're 6th in points allowed, and I feel like the struggles on offense starting to bleed into the defense because they come out really strong. I thought they come out strong against Rye. It was 10-0 at half, and then they got worn down. And so, again, it's this defensive front seven. Taking away the run game against Mayapack is going to be top priority. You need that front seven. Belidamaj, Haynes, Marisi, Olsey. Hey, we need to dominate in the front seven on both sides of the ball if we have a chance to win. And in the secondary, again, just limiting the big plays is going to be huge. And I think they've been all right in the secondary. So, to me, that's kind of the formula for both teams. Thoughts, Mars, before I give my game pick?
Yeah, I mean, this
you can
is
give your game pick, by the way,
interesting
too.
Game. You want me to give my game pick?
You can after you talk about them.
Okay, so this is obviously an interesting game, mainly because these teams have. It feels like there's that, I guess you'd call it rivalry because they are constantly playing each other in first round of the playoffs almost every year. And the games have relatively been pretty close for the most part. And I feel like for Mayapack, the advantage is easy to tell is that they have size and they have a lot of aggressiveness up front. And in their offensive defensive lines have been dominating and bullying people throughout the year. But obviously, the big question is going to be whether or not they can really play enough defense to slow down really any sort of rush attack that Harrison's going to try to really try to push forward. And Harrison struggles on offense. And like you said already, Frank, I know you had your your exorcism speech for Harrison to try to wake them up a little bit.
Defensively, they've been pretty strong. But
offensively, they've been something's going
getting
on
questions.
Something's happening over there. But I think the big thing I'm thinking about for this game is whose weakness is going to be resolved more. Is it Mapack's defense, which is their biggest weakness, or is it Harrison's offense, which is their biggest weakness? The question of that is going to be what will change this game, right? If Harrison wakes up and can move the ball and be efficient and not make dumb mistakes, then they'll win the game, right? If Mayapack plays defensively well, then they'll win the game. Because I feel like it's going to be a really interesting match between the Harrison's defense and Mayapack's offense because they're going to be gritty, right? Mayapack's going to try to bully them. Harrison's going to be very gritty up front. It's going to be interesting what happens there. But because of this, I feel like I'm going to go with Mayapack. I feel like they're the bigger team. They have, I guess they're a very simplified scheme. They're just going to try to run you over and try to beat you on with their speedy receivers. And I'm unsure how Harrison's offense is going to play against a sizable Mayapack team. Like, they're not just big guys up front. They just have a big team and a very strong team. And I feel like that's going to be the big question for me. I think Mayapack wins in the battle of, I don't know what the battle of McDonald's, I guess you want to call it. There's no rivalry name for this, but I feel like they're battling each other all the time. But I feel like I'm going to Mayapack. I think they just have the size advantage here. And I just feel like Harrison's offense has struggled.
Yeah, they have. And I will say this. I think this is kind of the upset a lot of people, I think, are going to be predicting out of the group for this game. But I'm going to say this. I gave a big exorcism talk. I seem very down on Harrison. But I'm not. I think both teams are coming in struggling, like I mentioned, and why that's happened both times. But for Harrison, these are the kind of moments where they have veterans who went to the section title game. Yes, people say they don't have a lot of depth. They're banged up. I get it. But there are veterans on this team and superstar veterans that I mentioned already. And so for me, these are the kind of games and these are the kind of moments that when a team is struggling, those are the kind of guys that we're going to dominate no matter what. And that's like Dante Lanza and Marisi and Belita Maj. That says we're going to be the most, again, we play both ways. It's like, oh, the defense is playing good, but the offense is struggling. But they play both ways. They're all playing both ways. It's not a whole different group that comes out. So it's up upon them to say, hey, we don't, we're not going to throw it 30 times team. We got to run the ball and we got to be efficient. And it's starting dominating up front. And I think the veterans and the superstar players, to me, is going to be a close game. But I think the veterans of Harrison and being at home is the slight difference that's going to be in this. I'm going to go with Harrison to win. All right. But don't be surprised. Let's go to the next one, Mars. We have number 4 seed Brewster, who's 5-3 at the number 1 seed Rye, who is 8-0. Both these teams historically have not played a lot. I mean, they're 1-1 versus each other, and both games were very close. The last time these two played was in 2022, where Rye won 34-30. And when you look at these two teams, Brewster lost 31-24 versus Yorktown, a very entertaining game. Rye won 24-0 versus Harrison in their big rivalry game. And again, this is an interesting matchup to me because, listen, Brewster, offensively, I thought last week they were pretty strong. They didn't have their quarterback in Dylan. Prohaska came in. He was impressive. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, a passing touchdown. Some of the other guys who have made plays in like Vicara, running the ball, Schmidt making some plays in the passing game. I think you see a lot of condensed formations, quarterback design runs, similar to what you saw versus Yorktown. Now, running against Rye isn't that simple, but that's what they have to play with. If Dillon does come back, you can do a nice little rotating between their quarterback and Prohaska, in my opinion, and Dillon, who's a little bit more efficient throwing the football. But I was very impressed. But this offensive line has some size and strength to it. But can they handle the strength of this Rye defense and the pressure that they like to bring? Is going to be interesting. They did have 2 turnovers last week that were killer, and at times that really hurt Brewster. But this defense, Mars, is good. We've talked about it quite a bit. They're number 3 in points allowed. And what's interesting, Mars, they've played the top 3 offenses now in 3 straight weeks, including Rye. They played Somers 2 weeks ago, Yorktown last week, and now they're playing Rye. This is the top 3 scoring offenses in A. So this defense has been battle-tested. And it's been a little bit rough the last couple of weeks, but they've been scrappy. And the secondary, I think, has played pretty well, even though they're a bit undersized. Now, you're going to be playing the weapons against Rye, which is quite a lot, and you're going to be undersized against them. So it's going to be really important for this defensive front 7, probably with some light boxes. They have to win those one-on-one matches. And when they come into kind of these condensed formations for Rye, you have to be wary of the play action out of it, the shifts out of it. And again, keeping Miller inside the pocket is going to be so huge. And as for the other side, Rye has been really, really impressive. This is the number 2 offense, Mars. 5 30-plus point games scoring. We've noticed a trend with Rye over the last few weeks. They start fast. They're throwing the ball all over the place. Right? They come out of the game. They love throwing the football. And then when it gets to the second half, they seem to slow the game down and start running the football with physicality. And you saw that versus Harrison last week. Really started to try to throw it. Things weren't as smooth as they liked, and what they do, they ran with authority in the second half with Giuliano, with Ramachandran. They went into the Wildcat, with the multiple backs and tight ends, and just direct snap to Giuliano and him running the ball. They won the section title that way last year, right? That's what you saw again, and I'm expecting to see a similar trend. Trying to test this secondary, hitting the big plays early, running the football with authority. Probably, again, getting those condensed formations running to the outside because Brewster got some size to him. So running in between the tackles ain't that simple. But, quarterback Miller didn't have his best game last week. Had a couple mistakes. One of them was an INT. Should have probably been 2 INTs. But he ran the ball well. He had over 100 yards rushing. You have all these weapons in Fenton and Kesner, Hess, Shoemaker. And it's going to be interesting for Rye to see how exactly do they play these receivers. If they're bringing the safeties and keeping them inside to try to take away Fenton and Kesner, you're going to get one-on-one matchup with Hess and Schumacher. Right? Those are going to be some of those big things that they got to keep an eye on and take advantage of them. And to me, running the ball with Giuliano Ramachandran behind this O-line that has been a force, creating that balance is that's when Rye's at its best, when they have that balanced attack. So I'm expecting to see a balanced attack, and this is the number 1 defense, Mars, in points allowed. If they can stop the run, especially these quarterback runs when Prohaska is in, if they just don't give up, Brewster was pretty smart. They did some well-designed plays last week. Just don't fall for those trick plays. Force Brewster to be consistent and efficient on offense. I don't know if they can continuously keep up with this Rye offense. I'm going to go with Rye. Defensively, guys like Saya, McGuire, Wilmarth, Strazzini's been like a human missile. That dude has delivered massive hits, forced turnovers, because he really knows how to put a licking on you. I just think Rye has too much. I think Brewster, I give Brewster a lot of credit. Before the season started, Mars, they were like, we're going to the playoffs. Coach Tucker, we're going to the playoffs. And they backed it up, right? So kudos to them for that. But going to Rye is playing at a very, very high level. I just don't know if Brewster's offense can keep up with Rye's offense. And so for that reason, I'm going with Rye.
Yeah, this is definitely, you gotta give some stuff for Brewster. Like, give some credit to Brewster mainly because their defense has been playing very well throughout the year. Their offense has definitely been their biggest struggle by far, and they just haven't been able to be consistent. But I do agree. Against Yorktown, they were pulling all the stops. They were going reverse.
The reverse pass.
Flicker pass, not touchdown, but close to a touchdown in the range. They're throwing the kitchen sink at teams, and I can guarantee they're going to do that again.
Yes.
I just think the only difference now is that I think Rye is going to expect it, and I think Rye is going to be more putting the pressure down. The only thing I could see that happens with Rye is that they might start off slow, and playing against a gritty defense, and then they start to wake up a little bit and they start kind of just driving and getting some scores because they just have such a high-powered offense. Because we've actually seen when Rye does play a tougher defense, they do start they start games out slow.
It's when they can't get the passing game going right away because they always like to come out slinging the ball around, and that's how sometimes things get slowed down.
Yeah, and I feel like we've seen that from Rye at times, not really that often, but we've seen it, and I feel like we could possibly see it again where they start slow, but I agree with you. I just don't think Rye is going to stay down for long, and they just have so many weapons that they just are going to be unstoppable. I feel like when it comes to how they're going to be able to progress the ball. I said it all year. Miller has been playing on Madden levels, and he's been scoring touchdowns, a lot of yards. But he's been making some mistakes, right, in the last few
forcing
weeks.
Things. He's been forcing.
Yeah, forcing things when he didn't have to. But I feel like it's like that gamble. You either hit big or you don't, and I feel like more often he's been hitting big. So I'm also gonna go Rye here.
All right, let's go to the next one, and we got 83% that says Rye is gonna win this one. Next up, let's do the number 3 seed Eastchester, who's 5-3 at the number 2 seed Yorktown, who's 5-3. Historically, Yorktown is 3-0 versus Eastchester, but the last time they played was in 2021. Last week, Eastchester won 28-26 at Yonkers Brave. Yorktown won 31-24 at Brewster. And again, looking at these two teams, for Eastchester, it's again a nice feel-good moment for the program. They've reached the playoffs now back-to-back years for the first time since I think it was 2015-2016. And offensively, I know it's been up and down. They're ninth in points scored. It always starts with the run game with them. They have that duo running back at Ciafone, who had 184 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. He was really good. Artucci is another one. He had 95 yards and a touchdown. They ran the ball for over 300 yards last week, and it's going to run well for them because Yorktown, in recent weeks, has struggled to stop the run. And so that's going to be big for Eastchester. They got to run the ball. They got to attack the outside of Yorktown, especially if they're going to get kind of this 4-3 look and that third linebacker's inside the box. To try to attack the outside using your speed is going to be really important. Quarterback Maltese is another guy who can run the ball for Eastchester. Defensively, this is the number 5 defense in points allowed. Was not their best game last week. They gave up a bunch of rush yards. And we've seen at times this defense has given up big plays. So that's something they have to keep in mind. I mean, they have playmakers. It's multiple guys. They don't have a superstars on defense, but it's a cast of guy in Burbridge, Ciafone, Martucci, Telesco, Gleason, Rataco. Multiple guys who can make it, but again, you're going to be playing up against a team that loves to throw the ball and has got a lot of speed. So giving up big plays is something you cannot do. This cannot be a track meet with Yorktown. That's the kind of game that they can win. Slow the game down, run the football, and prevent big plays, to me, is the big thing for Eastchester. For Yorktown, again, this is the number 3 offense. They like to throw the ball. We know about Gonzalez. He's a stud. He was 12-15. It wasn't his most efficient game, but he still had 2 touchdowns. Including the game-winning touchdown. But how about their wide receiver, Galante, Mars? He has been an absolute superstar for them. I think he broke the school record in touchdown receptions, tied the school record in receptions. I mean, he's going to break that in this game if he hasn't yet already. Just been super, super impressive. He is very, very speedy and explosive. But he's not alone. You have McEnroe, Moritz, and then this kind of different running back group, Carciati, Bone, and Hunter. Can this offensive line be physical? Right, if they can push around Eastchester, I think they have opportunities to run the ball, which will open things up in the passing game. I know they love passing, but they have to keep the defense honest if they're going to give you light boxes. Defensively, Mars, they've allowed 24-plus points in 3 out of the last 4 games. So this defensive line in front 7 definitely needs to step up. Last time they really dominated things was against Mayapack. But outside of that, they've given up quite a bit of points. So, this defensive front 7's really got to step up. If they can, you'll see some they forced a couple turnovers last week, but they got pushed around a little bit and gave up way too many rush yards. That's got to be the top priority. For me, I'm going to go with Yorktown. Eastchester is a little bit younger. They do have some veterans here, but Yorktown at home, the defense doesn't really put up back-to-back really bad performances. They play pretty solid against Rye, even though Rye's super well-powered. Last week, they did not play a great game. I'm expecting them to bounce back this time around. I think they forced a couple turnovers. And this Yorktown, again, probably a little bit, they love to pass it, I get it. You're going to see Gonzalez throw 20-plus times. You know that. But can they run the ball a little bit more, be a little bit more balanced? I think it'll open things up for their pass attack. I'm going to go with Yorktown to win this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a very really interesting game for me as well because I feel like Eastchester has played some really gritty defense, and they've always been. I feel like every year Eastchester's defense has been gritty.
The last couple of
Their
years, yeah.
offense is definitely yeah, their offense has been struggling. And when you look at Yorktown, it's like almost I mean, not to the same level, but a little bit of the opposite. I feel like offense has been very consistent. Defense the last few weeks has struggled. But one thing I want to keep in mind here, the last time they had a struggled game, like a game they struggled or they lost, in this case Fox Lane, what did they do the following week?
Yeah,
They utterly dominated on both
they
sides of
did.
the ball.
They
And
dominated
I'm not
Mapac.
saying
Yep.
that not going to say that this is a complete domination game, but this is going to be a game where Yorktown kind of wakes up again and says, we made dumb mistakes allowing for reverse flicker passes. We
It's
kept
not even
Brewster in the
that. That
game
like happens. It's the run plays. They gave up
yeah,
so many rush
it
yards.
was just letting up mistakes that normally they would stuff or stop. And like I agree with you, they played a really tough game against Rye. That guess what meant nothing according to the way the Section 1
I
rules
know.
work. Which when you think of that and then you say, hell, man, we kept up with that top tier offense, and then they struggled a little. They struggled a little bit against Brewster. They're probably saying we got to wake up. And the same thing happened with Fox Lane. They showed up in Mapac and just owned, right? And
Yeah.
so I got a feeling that Yorktown's going to have a pretty big showing this week. I think defensively they're going to step up. Offensively they're going to continue doing what they're doing. I'm going to go Yorktown.
All right, and 60% agree with us on this. They think Yorktown is going to win. Let's go to the final A matchup, Morris, and that is number 4 seed Clarkstown South, who's 5-3, at the number 1 seed Somers, who is 8-0. These teams played last year, where Somers won 42-13. Now, last week, Clarkstown South won 14-0 versus Mayapack. Somers won 49-0 at Lakeland. When I look at these two teams, Mars, Clarkstown South's offense has started to wake up. I mean, they've now moved all the way up to 7th out of 13 in points scored after they were one of the bottom teams in offense. They've scored 20-plus points in 2 out of the last 3 games, and they've really figured things out of running the football with physicality. Now, last week, they put in their, at the quarterback spot, usually their running back, who does move at the quarterback, Oliveri, and he ran the ball very well. They had that duo of Oliveri and Van Etten, and it was a really nice combo running the ball between the quarterback and running back. But he also had 2 passing touchdowns. So they were able to keep Mapac's defense honest with some of this rollout pass game, and he made some nice plays, throwing to guys like Tito, throwing to guys like Reddy. And so I think they found something here. Now, running against Somers is not going to be that easy because you're going to get a lot of condensed boxes. But if this offensive line can play with that physicality, similar to what they did versus Mayapack, they can find some success running the ball. The big thing running the ball is to get those 4 yards. If they can stay ahead of the chains, because what Somers has done such a good job, and I'll get to them, is getting you in 2nd and 3rd and long. Teams have not been able to run the ball and getting into these 2nd and 5s, 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 3s. They just have not been able to do that. And so it puts so much pressure on their offense to make plays down the field throwing the football. And Somers has really done a good job of putting teams in that. And so for Clarkstown South, they can't get in those situations because, again, they don't have this typical throw it 30-time offense. They need to run the ball with physicality. And so they could take some shots because you're going to get some man coverage. They have to keep the defense honest, but they got to run the ball with physicality. Defensively, this group is 4th out of 13 in points allowed. The duo of Sparing and Artizone at the linebacker spot has been super active. I think they combined for 30 tackles last week. So, again, they're going to have to be put on an island because I know South is probably going to try to bracket Palazzolo. Right? Tito has been really good at the safety spot. They're probably going to be moving him around to where Palazzolo is going. And so these, you're going to see Somers, hey, we're getting some light box. We're going to run with physicality, whether it's with Iglesias, with Kelly. And these linebacker cores are going to have to be super aggressive to try to slow it down, Mars. On the other end, for Somers, what a dominant second half Somers had, huh? I mean, it felt like since the halftime when they played Mayapack, a switch went off and it hasn't turned off since. Or switch turned on and it hasn't turned off since. And, offensively, they have 6 40-plus point games, Mars. Offensively. They are the number 1 offense easily in points scored per game. It starts with the 3 Musketeers. right? Iglesias, Kelly, Palazzolo, we talk about them quite a bit on this show. They've accounted for 16 touchdowns over the last 3 games. I mean, these are just ridiculous numbers between them. But they're not alone. I mean, other guys stepping up like Violante, Marcus, Kennedy, Whippy. Multiple guys have stepped up over the last couple weeks because they're getting those one-on-one matchups and they're winning them because so much attention goes to these other guys. And offensively, I know against South, they're just going to play their game. It's their balanced attack. Hey, you give us heavy boxes, we're going towards the outside to Palazzolo, some of these other wideouts. You give us light boxes, we're going to run them with physicality with Kelly. And that formula has worked. And then until a team proves that they can win those one-on-one matchups, you keep going to it. The only thing is it just can't get... Somers is also very good when they're balanced. But when they're trying to force the ball throwing it because they're getting very pass-happy and the connection is just not there, that's when their offense gets put back behind. Keep that balanced attack because that is when they are so damn deadly. Defensively, this is the number 2 defense in points allowed, Mars. You remember a few weeks back we were like, this defense is not as dominant as it used to be. But they have completely turned things around. They have not allowed more than 7 points in 4 straight games. And it's because they are stopping the run. This defensive line, led by Harris, and this linebacker group by Monahan and Kennedy, they have gotten more aggressive. They have done a good job of anchoring down the point of attack. These linebackers are not waiting. They're not hesitant. They're attacking. And Somers is saying, hey, we're going to play aggressive man and going to give you some loaded boxes, see if you can run against it, because then we get you second, third, and long, and we don't think you can throw. And so that's been the formula for them. They've done a really good job of slowing the running game. That's obviously against South, where you have Oliveri and Van Etten. You need to slow that group down, force them to say, hey, try to beat us in man coverage with a quarterback who's really a running back. Thoughts, Mars, and then we'll go to film.
Yeah, I mean, South has definitely been improving since the beginning of the season, and I think you kind of mentioned, I'm trying to recall this, but I believe you mentioned that South had been one of the top teams in A. In my
before the season, I did.
Yeah, before one of your early predictions, and
they were making me look foolish early on.
They're not the top team, but they have improved since the beginning because they had some struggles in the beginning of the season. They've gotten better. And I feel like the big question for me is going to be their offense, right? They've scored 20-plus points in the last 2 out of 3 games. Last 3 games. And, it's going to be a question of how are they going to be able to manage against the Somers defense that has been very impressive. And I agree with you. Somers has turned it on, right? They turned on their full momentum after that halftime of Mayapack game because that game got out of hand really quickly in the second half. And they just been running ever since. And I was one of the people that said that Somers always has slow first halves of games, and then they kind of destroyed that rhetoric after that Mayapack game. And their defense and offense have just been clicking all cylinders. They've been dominant, right? If it's not Rye, Somers is obviously looking like the team in A. Rye, I was saying for a while, was the team, and then Somers kind of took that and ran with it.
Yeah.
So, I think obviously Somers has to really just stay consistent to what they were used to doing and just owning both sides of the ball here.
All right, now I was going to do film. Unfortunately, the film's acting a little weird, and so I don't want to mess around and lag the stream. So we're going to skip over the film, Mars. Who do you have winning and why?
When I look at this game, obviously the closeness of playoffs is always playoffs. I mean, teams are competitive and teams are always going to battle. And, even looking at the live chat, we have 38% people out there say South is going to win this game.
Pull the major upset. That would be a historic upset.
I mean, that would be a historic upset if that would have happened. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Somers is going to win this game. I think South had a really tough win against Mayapack last week.
They did.
Shut them out, and they proved that they can compete against the size. I just don't. There's a big difference between Mayapack and Somers, right? I'll just say that. Somers has the size, and they have a lot of weapons, and they have a lot of people you have to account for. I just don't think South has the ability to account for all the people that Somers has on the offensive end. I just feel like you said the Three Musketeers are just. There's just so many weapons that they have, and it's just like defenses really have to really force Somers to do what they don't want to. And unfortunately, it just seems like for South, there isn't a lot of things that Somers can't do
Yeah.
with these weapons. So, I just feel like Somers is gonna win this game.
I agree. Listen, Godzilla, which is my nickname for Somers, because they just wreak havoc on the landscape of A. You really have to have a balanced attack offensively. You have to be able to run the ball, get those 4 yards, because if you're behind the chains, you're really in trouble versus Somers. And so, to me, if you can run the ball, and Clarkson South has definitely improved without question, but if you can run the ball consistently and you have to start throwing it, that's where I think South gets into some trouble here. And you're going to have to, again, control the clock, because Somers' offense has been so good. But I am going to go with Somers, and Godzilla continues to reign over the A landscape. All right, let's go now to our last stretch, last 4 games, which is Double A. Let me pull up Double A schedule right here. Let's start off with the 8th seed Ketchum, who's 5-2, at number 1 seed North Rockland, who is 6-2. Historically, North Rockland is 6-2 versus Ketchum, and they have won 4 straight in this matchup. So let's talk about these 2 teams, Mars. And again, we have in the chat, we have the poll guys. Let us know who you think is going to win. But let's start with Ketchum. And, they won 7-6 versus Mount Vernon. This is also a bounce back for this program, because they have 5 wins, like I mentioned at the top. They've not had 5 wins in a season since 2019. So, they've went through a pretty damn rough stretch here, and getting back into the playoffs, getting those 5 wins, I think is big for them. Coach talked about it, how it's, they faced a lot of losing, and that can wear on a program. And so these kids worked hard and got that, and now they get into the playoffs. They get 5 wins for the first time in 5 years. And so it's a good moment for them. Now, can they pull off the upset against the number 1 seed? Right, that's the question. Offensively, it has been a little rough the last 2 games, and they're still 5th in points scored, but they've scored 7 points each of the last 2 games. One was a loss, one was a win, and it always starts with running the ball with them. With guys like Faye and this offensive line, who has been a pretty solid core for this team. They've been gritty, but they need to step up. Right, they're going up against some size in North Rockland. They need to run the ball, because they're not a drop back and throw it a whole bunch, team. They like to run the ball in between the tackles, get out on the edge, and then the pass game complements that. And, Fitzsimmons, he had a passing touchdown last week as their only score to Brooks, and that was enough. But, if you're putting all the pressure, and North Rockland can put pressure on your quarterback, that leads to turnovers. And so they got to establish the run game. Defensively, this is, they've been pretty good the last couple of weeks. This is 5th in points allowed out of 15 schools in Double A. Biber and Turner made a huge play last week to stop the 2-point conversion, pretty much to win that game versus Mount Vernon. But preventing the big play, the chunk play we call it. Again, it's like plays over 15 yards. North Rockland has made a killing off of that. Long touchdown plays. The only touchdown that Ketchum gave up last week was a long touchdown play from a running back. Now you're going up against one of the most dynamic running backs in Section 1. You have to limit big plays, the chunk plays. That is North Rockland's bread and butter. It has won them a lot this year. And so keeping everything in front of you and tackling well in space is going to be so important for this Ketchum team. For North Rockland, they won 30-0 at Suffern. And when I reach out to coach, what did it mean? Because North Rockland hasn't been the number 1 seed in a few years, right? It's been a while. And, we know North Rockland has a history of being a very good football program. So, I asked Coach what did it mean to them, and he always talked about this was a process. And so we don't always look at wins and losses. We looked at, are we doing the right things in the program? And eventually that'll lead to that, right? And so it's good for them to see that, all that work in the background come out to program success. So getting the number 1 seed obviously is huge for them. Offensively, they're number 3 out of the 15 schools in Double A in points scored. They have 4 30-plus point games, Morris. And again, I mentioned they're a big play machine. Jaquan Johnson had over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. 2 50-plus yard touchdowns. Perini has been throwing the ball. Again, if he limits the turnovers, he's been pretty efficient. And then you got guys like Jaslow and Lawrence, who are those big play guys on the outside. That's their offense. They got to give it to Jaquan Johnson. They want to throw it to him. They want to get them to the second level out in space, because there's not people who can keep up with their speed. Defensively, they've allowed 14 or less points in 4 of the last 5 games. I think this is the best secondary in this section. You got a bunch of playmakers. If they can stop the run, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Ketchum to throw against this group. And because of that, I am going to go with North Rockland. I don't think Ketchum has enough offensively against this defense that they could pull off the upset. And I do think you're going to see North Rockland hit on a few big chunk plays in this one that is going to lead to touchdowns. And I think North Rockland just a little too much. I'm going to go with North Rockland.
Yeah, I feel like obviously you got to give kudos to Ketchum. I mean, they, like you said before, it's been a while since they've had 5 wins, and they're gritty, and they really fought to get themselves in the playoffs, and they earned it. But I do agree. I feel like North Rockland is just too much talent, big playability. You get them in space. Any of those guys can make a big play, and you saw that against Scarsdale. You saw that against Carmel. You saw that against a lot of teams. And I just feel like North Rockland has just been a dominant squad up front, and you're playing them at home in Rockland.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Not an easy place to play in. I think we both. I know I definitely.
Even though we have bad memories. We've had bad
memories of that. So I just know that it's not an easy place to play in. I'm going to go with North Rockland.
Yeah, let's go to the next matchup. And we have all 100% think North Rockland's going to win. Double A matchup, we have number 7 seed Ossining, who's 6-1, at the number 2 seed Scarsdale, who's also 6-1. They have not played this year against each other. Last week, Ossining won 6-0 at East Ramapo. Scarsdale won 35-21 versus Arlington. And looking at Ossining, Mars, they have 6 wins for the first time in a season since 2013. So, very impressive year for Ossining, and it starts with the run game. We know that it can be hit or miss, but the duo of Ibarra and Ramirez have been really good this year running the football. They run with physicality. This offensive line has been a real strong point for them. And their quarterback in McCormick hasn't been asked to throw a lot, but he can also run as well. So running the ball is obviously top priority and controlling the clock. This might be the fastest game out of all the playoff games this upcoming week. Defensively, they're the number 1 defense in Double A in points allowed. You have Aiden Moore, who to me is a menace to offensive society. He is so disruptive. He is just a beast. You can put him at D tackle, put him at D end. Pine has 8 interceptions this year on the back end, forcing a lot of turnovers. You have McCormick, Schott, and Cassione, multiple guys. This has been a strong defensive unit, but can they slow down the option attack of Scarsdale? Is going to be obviously super important. Got to take away Gilligan, force their quarterback to make plays, either running the ball or throwing the ball, because you can't let those big play guys in Scarsdale beat you. That's going to be the toughest thing for Ossining, is to try to, again, get Scarsdale into 2nd and 3rd and long. 2nd and 3rd plus 5. That's what I kind of say. When you play in Scarsdale, get him into 2nd and 3rd plus 5 yards, and you're in pretty good shape. For Scarsdale, this is the number 2 offense, Mars. How about that? You want to talk about crazy? Scarsdale's moved up to number 2 in points scored in Double A. They've scored 28 plus points in 4 of the last 5 games. And this is old school football, baby. Option football. And it's led, by the way, by Gilligan. He had 4 touchdowns last week. And I really like how Scarsdale has brought in, you have Krupkin, who's a big play guy at the running back spot. They've also brought in one of their wide receivers in Vibert, put him at the halfback spot, creating even more explosive players, at the halfback spot. Now, they've had some fumbles, which is a bit ugly. So they got to clean that up. You saw that last week. They've had some uncharacteristic fumbles. But, this is an offense that runs the offense very efficiently. The quarterback, Emner Boris, has to be very smart with the ball, right? Because he's the orchestrator. So he's got to be very smart. And Gilligan continues to be a stud. This offensive line is not very big. It's going to be tested against, again, this Ossining defensive front with guys like Moore who are tough. But they've been a scrappy group. I think this is going to be such a fun game to watch just in the trenches. Not fun if you're a spread guy. That's that I could tell you. It's going to be pretty boring if you're a spread guy. But, this is going to be interesting. But Scarsdale is the number 2 defense, Mars. You have the number 1 defense versus the number 2 defense. Well, they're not playing each other, but the number 1 and number 2 defense in this game. So they didn't have their best game last week for Scarsdale. Gave up some big plays. They did force 4 turnovers and 3 INTs. And this defensive line and their linebacker group and Brennan and Gilligan trying to slow down Ossining's run attack. This is going to be a fast one, Mars. And in my opinion, the first 1-14 wins. I think you're going to see a 14-7 game in this one, and it's going to be Scarsdale who wins out on top.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Scarsdale, and I think the biggest thing for me is going to be this, I guess you say, discipline in trying to defend this option football. Scarsdale has been dominant at doing that all year long. They're the second in points scored, which tells me there's a lot of teams out there that aren't practicing their disciplined defenses to try to stop the option, because Scarsdale's been owning people up front when it comes to that. And I do agree that defensively they've been really impressive. I just don't know if Ostening's offense can really get up on the board much at all. As long as Scarsdale's defense does not give up massive plays and just slow down the run, then I feel like their offense is going to control the line of scrimmage. They're going to own the time possession. I'm going to go Scarsdale here.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. And this is a rematch as well. And what was it? 100% at Scarsdale winning. So the number 6 seed Suffern, who's 3-5, at the number 3 seed Mamaroneck, who is 5-3. These guys played a couple weeks back in week 5, where Suffern won 21-7 at Mamaroneck. So this is a rematch of pretty much that same game. Mamaroneck is home. And last week, Suffern lost 30-0 versus North Rockland. Mamaroneck lost 28-7 at John Jay's Fishkill. And these are two teams going into the playoffs struggling, Mars. Suffern has lost 2 straight. Mamaroneck has lost 2 out of the last 3 games. So things have to turn around very quickly here. And for Suffern, I called them this last week, and I do it respectfully. We joke around. We like to joke around here, have some fun with it. But there is truth in here. I make this joke because they're the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde team. You don't know which team is going to come week to week, because they have some real good players on this team. But sometimes they don't execute. And offensively, they're 9th out of 15 in points scored. We know about Jeff Joseph. He's an absolute stud. And the last time they played Mamaroneck, he dominated. He really turned the game. I think he ran for over 270 yards and really dominated the second half of that game and gave them the victory. And this offensive line was really good. Question is the consistency there up front. And you have guys like their quarterback in Palumbo and their wide receiver in Tirana and Mitchell, who could hit big plays for you, but they've also had a lot of negative plays, penalties, turnovers. And again, they kind of struggled last week. They have weapons out there, but they couldn't move the ball consistently. Now, North Rockland is good. I get it. But again, this is who you're competing against, playoff teams. So everyone's has a level of goodness here. You're not playing bad teams. So can you move the ball consistently against Mamaroneck? They did a really good job a couple weeks ago, just grounding and pounding on them and making the efficient plays in the passing game. Defensively, they're 12 out of 15 in points allowed. They've allowed 21-plus points in 4 of the last 5 games. Now you're up against a backup quarterback, if Jacobson's not playing, and a young running back. They allowed 200 yards rushing, over 200 yards rushing last week. So stopping the run is obviously the number one priority. They did that they did that pretty well versus Mamaroneck last time. They got to do that again, right? That's obviously going to be a big thing. For Mamaroneck offensively, Mars, it's been a struggle. They're 11th in points scored. They've not scored 20 points in 3 straight games. Listen, they've lost their quarterback in Jacobson, which changes the identity of their offense. But like I said, about the exorcism, about Harrison, talked about a while ago. For Mamaroneck, it's, hey, we got a junior quarterback if Jacobson doesn't play. We got a sophomore running back in Leibowitz if he's not, if he's a starter. This offensive line, who has a veteran group, and the wide receiver core who's got playmakers, they need to step up. Right? You got young guys who are trying to carry the load. You guys are the ones who got to make plays for your team. This offensive line against a beat-up, suffering team needs to dominate in the trenches. That's how you turn this offense around. Dominate in the trenches. Open up holes. Protect your young quarterback. Right? Those are the things that you can do, right, to make their life a little easier. So, yes, they got some injuries. Yes, they got some young guys filling in the role. But there's some veteran guys at the other spots. So they got to win those one-on-one matchups. Defensively, it's been a solid unit. Right? They're 6th in points allowed. They have to stop the run. And so for this defensive front 7 and Glassman, Murphy, these linebackers, they got to be very disruptive and get Jeff Joseph early, because he hits the hole hard. He gets that second level. No one's touching. This is a hard one for me to pick, because it's very difficult to beat a team twice. Suffern has to go on the road, but Suffern is beat up. Mamaroneck is beat up. I think Mamaroneck is going to win it. Suffern has the star running back. Suffern has the veteran players. But Mamaroneck, to me, at home, I think they win in the trenches, Morrison. I think they're going to eke this out. This is going to be an ugly game, in my opinion. I think they slow down Jeff Joseph enough. I think Mamaroneck wins in this one.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about this game, obviously they played each other before. It's a lot harder to win a second meeting between another team. And Mamaroneck, before the injury to Jacobson, right?
Yep.
They were a dominant team, right? They were
good. They were on a roll.
One of those teams. Yeah, they were one of those teams. A lot of people were saying that they could be section title winners, right? Depending on how that offense has been efficient. And ever since Jacobson went down, their offense has really struggled. Their defense has been consistent, but their offense has really been struggling to get some points. And Suffern, like you said, it just depends on what Suffern team we're going to find out or who's going to show up that day. Because we all know that one of the fixers or the cleaners, and Jeff Joseph is going to be there. But, the question is going to be to everybody else. But I'm going to go with the upset. I'm going to go with Suffern, right? Because I know that Suffern had won last time, and I know it's hard to beat a team twice. But I feel like this is one of those moments where Mamaroneck still hasn't figured out their offensive game. And I'm not going to say this to rag on John Jay, but John Jay is not really hasn't really performed that well this year. And they had basically stuffed Mamaroneck, right? And granted, usually when you lose a bad game, you wake up. I just don't know how Mamaroneck's going to wake up because you don't really have a lot of dudes that can match the level of Jacobson right now, and you really need to watch. You need your veterans to step up big time to fill in those spaces to really, as a team, combine to help win this game, to elevate those younger players that are stepping into new spots. So I don't know if that's going to happen. I just know that Suffern, I got a feeling that they're going to kind of step in the right figure when they play in the game. Jeff Joseph plays very well, right, all year long, but I feel like when that playoff mood hits, it's going to be like getting Anthony Edwards out there. He's got to step it up.
That's a basketball reference.
I know, basketball reference for people don't know. I just think that he's a dude, and I feel like he's going to kind of put the game on his back. Yeah. I'm going to go with Suffern.
So let's go to the last game, and I know it's been a long one, and again, film is not really working. I don't want to mess around with the guys because I don't want to cause some YouTube issues and some lag issues like we had last time. So I'm going to skip the film, and I know it's a big part of our thing, so I do apologize, but also running out of time, and I don't want to, spend time live to try to fix it, guys. So I'll apologize there. But let's get to the last matchup, and that is the number 5 seed Arlington, who's 3-5, at the number 4 seed Carmel, who is 4-3. And before I keep going, we will have film going forward. Just want to, again, just run into these are the issues when you're not taping and you can't edit things where you have to run live. So, but boy, this big rivalry game in the playoffs, Mars. And they played earlier this year. They played in week 5 where Carmel won 41-28. It was a very entertaining game. And so, again, a rematch of the same thing at Carmel. And Arlington lost 35-21 at Scarsdale last week. Carmel won 32-6 at New Rochelle. And when you look at these two teams, listen, I know Arlington, they were a few weeks back one of the worst offense, I think 14th in the league, right? It was like 14th in the league in points scored. And they have definitely been better of late. They have scored 20-plus points in 3 straight games. When they played Carmel last time, they ran the ball very well. They ran for over 200 yards, and it was some of their spread them out counter action and also getting out on the edge. That Carmel has shown issues to struggle. They've shown the inability to stop teams running to the outside. And so, no question, Arlington is going to go back to that, right? And their quarterback in Rancourt, who's a young guy, you've seen some low moments. You've seen some really bright moments. And he had 3 touchdowns last week that have been pretty impressive, but he also had 3 INTs, right? So it's always that give and take. You've seen some really bright moments, some really ugly moments, but he is the orchestrator of this offense. And it really helps having that tandem of wide receiver Tuttle and Joshua. These are the big play guys on the outside that playing man against them is pretty tough. So if you're going to get man coverage, there's going to be opportunities to hit some big plays. If you're going to get zone coverage, there's opportunities to run the ball. So interested to see, running the ball with Rancourt, running the ball with Russo. I think they have some opportunities, but turnovers have been such a major problem for Arlington. I mean, Coach has mentioned it already. They had 4 last week. In the loss versus Carmel, they had 2. They were up on Carmel, if you recall, but then a bunch of turnovers and then giving a bunch of plays up on defense, which is the next thing I'm talking. They forced 2 turnovers last week. You have Thomas, Bedoin, Riamuto as playmakers, and even Tuttle on the outside. But Carmel slinged the rock all over them and even ran the ball, I think, over 100 yards as well. I think they gave up well over 400 yards. Obviously, you cannot do that in this time around. So limiting big plays is going to be a huge part of it. And it's just, again, getting pressure on the quarterback because Carmel, with the injuries that they've had, they're going to throw the ball a lot. So that's going to be a big thing for Carmel, man. This is the number 1 offense. They continue, even with losing their star running back in Worley. They have 5 30-plus point games. What really worked well against Arlington is the RPO stuff, Mars, and the rub routes versus man coverage. And so if Arlington's going to come out, they have to have this secondary. If they're going to have their eyes peeking into the backfield, Carmel runs that RPO action, and they can hit on some big plays with these wide receivers. And if you're going to play a lot of man, Carmel likes to do a lot of these, they'll give you the crossers, they'll give you the rub action. So you have to be very smart. You have to run combinations. You have to communicate in the secondary. For defensively, this is the worst defense in points allowed out of the playoff teams. So for Carmel, if they could just limit big plays from Arlington, this offense can move the football. And so that's the big thing for me. Can this defense limit big plays? Mars, I'll let you pick the game first. Who do you got winning and why?
Yeah, I mean, this is a rivalry game, and obviously these 2 teams have been battling each other for the last few years, and whether we saw them in the section title game, which got pretty crazy, Carmel had a big win, and whether it was times where even coaches were getting at it. I mean, at the end of the day, it was getting heated.
That's a section title game, yeah.
Game. Yeah, and this is a rivalry game, and all the way around, right? So. Arlington showing up to Carmel. The Carmel crazies going nuts. It's going to be a game to watch, right? And I feel like a lot of people are going to go to this game because this is probably the most even team.
This I think is going to be a high-scoring game.
Yeah, I think both defenses have been struggling. Carmel's defense has, based on points, 13 out of 15. They've been in a spot where they are. For them, it's great that they have the highest scoring offense because. Yeah. Their defense has been unable to prevent high-scoring teams, but they've just been outscoring them by even more points. It's almost like that thing's like, oh, well, the defense can't stop a nosebleed, but at least the offense is running out the score by 40.
The offense keeps giving nosebleeds.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy, and so I agree with you. I feel like Arlington's best bet is to try to get to the outside because Carmel has been struggling to try to keep it contained. And they need to try to, and in my opinion, they need to slow the game down, right? Arlington needs to control the clock.
Yes.
And their strategy should be keep the ball out of Carmel's hands and to just keep the ball, hold on to it, and have long sustained drives. Because if you could do that, you give Carmel less opportunity. Because every time you give them the ball, they're going to score in high chances and a high volume. So just take the ball away out of their hands, and then you can win. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think Carmel's going to win this game, mainly because I just feel like they're going to get a lot more chances. And based on how they've been playing all year, even without Waterloo, right, they have been scoring at will at times, and a lot of it has to do with their passing game. Their offensive line has been doing very well in protection, and their passing concepts have been working out very well. Not a lot of teams have been practicing against the way in which Carmel's offensive passing tree has been working. I just don't know if Arlington's defense is going to be able to stop that either. They just haven't proven to me yet that they can do that. So I'm going to go with Carmel here.
Man, we've been agreeing too much. I don't know what's going on. I agree with you. I'm going to go with Carmel. Arlington's definitely playing better offensively. Defensively, they have given up a lot of big plays, and vice versa for Carmel, who offense has been strong all year long. Defensively, they've been really bad. Honestly, if I'm just being honest. They really struggle stopping teams going to the outside. So that's obviously going to be the thing. I think this is a high-scoring game, and I think Carmel just makes just enough, similar to the last time, where goes back and forth. Both teams take a lead at some point, but Carmel pulls away at the end, wins a close one. I'm going to go with Carmel. All right, everyone, that was our show. And what do we have? 50-50 on that. So, yeah, I do think it can go either way. But thank you guys, as always, for tuning into the show. Appreciate you guys so much. We put in so much time for this stuff to try to entertain you guys. I know the film has been, we'll try to continue doing film, but I also don't want to hurt the show like we did last week. If the film is slowing things down, I don't want to do that. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Big shout out to our Patreon members, as always, for donations and your support. Just want to give a special thanks to them. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll see you all very soon.